This live has been inspired by a podcast I recently watched of a gentleman by the name of Rich Cooper. He's one of the authority speakers in the whole red pill field, right? And for those of you who don't know what red pill is, it's not really the time for me to explain, but go ahead on YouTube and you can check it out. It's a very different way of thinking and dealing with women. And I prescribe to many of their mindsets and lessons, by the way. But without getting too much into that, he did a podcast, and the podcast revolved around a book that I have just recently finished, so I'm quite well informed on this book, called The 5 Love Languages. And essentially, him and the individual they had on the podcast, Apex Mindset, his name's Paul, they dismissed the book like very quickly. And Rich actually dismissed it without even having read the book in the first place. Now, the reasons why they dismissed it, I actually agree with their reasons. However, there's another side to the conversation that they haven't addressed, and I really want to talk about that today. Okay, but firstly and foremostly, I have a short message for Rich. And that is, Rich, I've benefited a lot from your content, for which I'm most grateful. A lot I have benefited from your content. You did make a comment on your podcast which was a bit concerning. And that was that you haven't read the book, but you had an opinion on the book. Listen, when it comes to knowledge, it's very, very important that we go out of our way. We actively seek to educate ourselves on the opposite argument, the opposite belief to what we hold. Just as in war, when you have an army, you try to infiltrate the opposition with spies. Why? So that you can find out what the tactics of the opposing army have up their sleeve. I have found no more powerful a way of refining and honing my knowledge than by studying the opposite argument. I learn so much more, because when it comes to my side of the argument, there's only so much you can learn. After that, it's pretty much the same thing repeated over and over. I am much more interested in what do people who oppose my beliefs have to say. And there's two benefits to this. You will get one of two things. The first thing you may get is an actual enlightenment, whereby you realize that your belief system is actually flawed, fundamentally flawed, and that you need to course correct and adopt this new belief. Well, brilliant, fantastic. If I am wrong, if I'm in the wrong, and I learn something that opposes my current belief system, and it's clear that I'm in the wrong, well, fantastic. Now I can adopt this new empowered belief, this better belief, and carry on in that direction with the new improved belief. That's the first thing that could happen. The second thing that could happen, which is what I am more interested in, is that not only do I not adopt this opposing belief, but rather reading about this opposing belief further cements my own beliefs in my stance. But now, with one fundamental difference, I know how the enemy thinks. I've infiltrated them with my spies, so to speak, using the war analogy. And now I know how they think, what makes them tick, where their arguments are flawed, and how I can attack it accordingly. This is so much more powerful than just surrounding yourself with an echo chamber of dudes and bros all saying the same thing. You don't learn much. I'll give you an example. I want you to imagine that this is a knife and this is a knife sharpener. Sharpen knives with. In order for me to sharpen this knife, I need to scrape across it like this, right? What would happen if I didn't apply force in my arm against the knife? I'll show you what will happen. The knife sharpener will simply push away from me. It will be impossible for me to sharpen the knife. So what needs to happen? Not only do I need to apply force with my knife, I must apply force with the knife sharpener. Excuse me. And in this way, with two opposing forces, are you able to sharpen the knife equally? If you want to sharpen your understanding of a topic, you need to read material that directly opposes your current belief system. Just like the knife and the knife sharpener example, you sharpen your own understanding of your beliefs. Your beliefs will either become corrected or cemented. And you have a much better insight into your belief system and how to attack and defeat the enemy's belief system. This is the beauty of studying the opponent's belief, of infiltrating the enemy with your spies, just as in war. So, there is a condition to this. There is a condition. And that condition is you should not study the enemy's argument. You should not study their point of view until you are fully confident in your stance, in your point of view. I'll give you an example. You've probably all heard of Muslims young Muslim men and women who went to university, studied a subject like philosophy, and then lo and behold, they became atheists. Right? They became atheists. And the reason for this is simple. Their knowledge in their religion of Al-Islam was fundamentally weak. It was weak. So when the doubtful hooks of atheism pulled them in, they forsake their religion and took on the beliefs of atheism. Now, some of the cynics in this chat, perhaps if you're an atheist, you might say, but there is no God. أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقَنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ? Do you think that we created you for play, for jest, for no reason, and that to us you shall not return? فَتَعَالَ اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. Of course you have been created for a purpose. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And we have not created jinn and mankind except to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our primary function, our primary purpose. But this is not an Islamic lecture. My point is just to make that very clear. We have been created for a purpose. So, before you go into studying the enemy's belief system, you must first be fundamentally sound on your belief system, your principles, on your position and your stance. Then you can go to the enemy and find out why they think the way they think. And one of two things will happen. You'll either be corrected or you'll either have a better understanding of why they think the way they do so you can defeat them. So Rich, I say to you, it's a statement of ignorance to dismiss a text without first reading it, without first understanding it. Very important. Okay, moving forward. Now, Dr. Gary Chapman, he's the author of this book. I believe it's the #1 best-selling book on Amazon in the marriage and relationships category. Mona, hold on to that boy, please. Don't let him hijack my live. It's called The 5 Love Languages. And I have to say, it was a very, very interesting read. I learned a lot from it. And essentially what he says, what Dr. Gary Chapman says is this, is that we all feel love. We all express our love in fundamentally different ways. In different ways. And he mentioned or outlined 5 different ways. And those different ways are physical touch. I'll just read them off to you. Quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service, and gift giving. And he said all of us recognize that we are being loved in one of those 5 different ways. Okay? In one of those 5 different ways. So if you are someone who feels loved by receiving gifts, and you're not receiving gifts from your partner, but you are receiving words of affirmation, you're so great, you're so beautiful, so on and so forth. What he asserts is that you still won't feel loved. Your love tank, as he refers to it, will be low. Your love tank will be low. Therefore, it's our job to identify what our partner's love language is so that we can speak to them in that language and fill up their love tanks. Now, I read this book off the back of Patrick Bet-David's recommendation. You have to follow Patrick Bet-David. My guy's a boss. That guy's going places. Allah Yahdi. That guy's going places. He's going to be big. He's already big. He's going to be bigger 10, 15 years from now. Valuetainment on YouTube as well. I learned a lot from Patrick Bet-David. And it was his recommendation to read that book so that you can understand how to deal with colleagues in the workplace. So that's why I read it. I read it fundamentally so that I can understand how to get the best out of employees, how to get the best out of business relationships. I didn't read it to get the best out of my marriage. So I came at it from a different angle. And the book can be used for all relationships. All relationships. Not just intimate relationships. In fact, when I read that book, I had an enlightening moment. I realized I was making a mistake with some of my children, that my children speak a particular love language, and I wasn't speaking to them in that language, gift giving. Some of my kids really like gifts. And I noticed that I've gone for long periods of time without giving them a gift, give them other things, words of affirmation and so on, but they weren't quite as connected to me as I wanted them to be. So I thought, let me just try a little experiment. I took a chocolate bar from the cupboard. I was like, let me just, guys, close your eyes. I've got a little present for you. Put your hands out. Put this chocolate bar in there. Thank you, Baba. Oh, we love you. Big hugs. I was like, whoa, really? I just gave them a chocolate. It was crazy. Like, I hadn't experienced that reaction from them in a very long time. So that was very interesting to me, very enlightening. I actually had my kids take the test and then implement it on them, see if this stuff works. I can't say for sure whether it does or not, but they were pretty damn happy. Much more happy than a kid should be for receiving a lousy 12 chocolate bar. You understand what I'm saying? So, now the issue that the likes of Rich Cooper and the Red Pill community take is, which I fully agree with, by the way, is that it's connected to desire. And what their argument is, if your wife doesn't desire you, or your girlfriend, depending on the dynamic of your relationship, it's because you're not speaking her love language. But this is what Gary Chapman asserts. And therefore, you need to speak her love language first, and then she will desire you. For example, your wife, your girl, she doesn't desire you, but her love language is acts of service. So therefore, you should go and mop the floor, wash the dishes, and hoover the lounge so that you can get sex. This is fundamentally wrong. And I completely agree with Rich and Paul from Apex Mindset on this. It's fundamentally flawed. Why? Because now you're making sex transactional. You're making sex transactional. This woman knows my guy's cleaned the floor so that he can have access to me. Now she feels guilty. She feels obliged to repay this transaction by opening her legs. That's not genuine burning desire, as Rich calls it. She's not doing it because she wants to. She's doing it because she feels obliged to. And that's a big problem. That's a big problem. Okay, so I agree here that you should not be doing those acts of service, cleaning the floor, washing the dishes, so that you can have sex with her. I agree. If your woman doesn't desire you, my friend, you have much bigger problems. And it's at this juncture in this discussion where we must make a distinction between love and desire. And neither Rich or Paul or Dr. Gary Chapman have made this distinction. And I must now give a huge amount of credit to Esther Perel. Esther Perel, one of her most famous books, Mating in Captivity. Incredible book. Please read it. Many things that are totally wild and I disagree with vehemently, such as swinging and porn and so on. Nevertheless, it was Esther Perel who brought this to my attention, the difference between love and desire. You can love someone and not desire them, just as you can desire someone but not love them. I will prove it. Do you have a mother? Do you have a father? Do you have brothers and sisters? Now I have a question for you. Do you desire them? Of course you don't. But do you love them? Yes, you do. You love them, but you don't desire them. Let's flip the conversation. Let's flip the conversation. Let's flip the question, I should say. Can you desire someone but not love them? Men and women alike. Well, let's answer it with an example. Becky meets Chad in a bar. Chad's got so much game, he's oozing game, that 15 minutes later, she finds herself in the back of the toilets giving him her body, doing what man and woman does. Does Becky desire Chad? Yes, she does. Does Becky love Chad? No, she doesn't. It is impossible to love someone after 15 minutes of meeting them. It doesn't happen. So we can clearly see here that there is a distinction between love and desire. Love and desire. A woman can love her husband, deeply love him, but she's got no physical attraction to him. Equally, a woman and a man can desire each other and have no love for each other. And both situations are terrible. If you love your woman, or if your woman loves you, but she doesn't desire you, you have a dead relationship. If your woman desires you, or if you desire her, but you don't love her, you have a toxic relationship. Both situations are bad. The red pill community like to focus on how women often cheat on men or leave their men because a woman no longer desires her man, no longer desires her husband. And this is true. I will say equally, women leave just as frequently from a relationship, if not more frequently, because she doesn't love him anymore. And you ladies tell me if I'm right or wrong. Women, in fact, are more emotionally connected than anything, which means I would assert that they're more likely to leave a marriage for lack of love than lack of desire. But who knows, I might be wrong. Regardless, my point is simple. Yes, a woman can have desire. She can desire you. But if she doesn't love you, sooner or later, she's going to leave your ass. Just as if she doesn't love you, sooner or later, she's going to leave your ass as well. So we need to stop this how can I describe it? This excessive focus on just desire. I understand if you're not into the relationship game, if you don't care about relationships and you just care about sex, then fine. You don't need to pay any attention to what I'm saying right now. Love is not a discussion for you to worry yourself with, my friend. It's not a discussion for you to worry yourself with. But if love is important to you, then the ultimate alpha is the man who is able to command both love and desire. If you can only do one of the two, my friend, I got news for you. You are a one-trick pony. Commiserations. You're a one-trick pony. You need to know how to kindle both love and desire. So I say this, to conclude on Gary Chapman's book. The mechanisms by which you make a woman love you or you make a man love you are different to the mechanisms by which you make a man or a woman desire you. But when it comes exclusively to love and not desire, I believe Dr. Gary Chapman's book, 5 Love Languages, is worth its weight in gold, is indispensable for increasing love. But my friend, I give you a word of warning. Do not wash that floor or clean those dishes for sex. That becomes transactional. That means your woman has no desire for you and you have much bigger problems. However, if your desire compartment of your relationship is taken care of, you and your wife desire each other, you're having regular sexual intercourse and there's no problems there, both partners are happy, then why not wash the floor for her if that makes her happy? Why not clean the dishes? Why not hoover the floor or whatever else it is? Help her around the house every now and again. No problem at all. Just make sure you're not doing it in order to get sex at the end of it, because that means you have a transactional relationship and you got much bigger problems. So that's how you take care of love. You figure out what their so-called love language is, and then you go about doing it. Different people, horses for courses. My kids, I noticed some of them respond to gifts. Others, it's words of affirmation. Others, it's physical touch, and on and on and on. You need to figure out what it is that person responds to the most and then love them in that way. For me, I'll tell you straight, it's food. That's how you're going to love me. You want to love me? Make me food. Make me good food. I really can't think of much other ways to love me, to be honest with you. Now, the next question you must be dying to ask me is, desire. Okay, Mahdi, you've covered love, but you've also told us that just because someone loves you doesn't mean that they will desire you. So, tell me, how do I get my woman to desire me? Well, I'm glad you asked. I need to refer to my notes here because this is where I need to get everything on point and in order. Okay, I wrote something earlier. This is something I made up from my head, but I want to read it word for word because I was quite proud of it, to be honest with you. Okay? And that is, desire is tension. And tension comes from not getting what you want. Again, desire is tension, and tension comes as a result of not getting what you want. for a period of time. And then finally, you releasing that tension by eventually getting what you want. Now, Oscar Wilde has a brilliant saying, and I'm going to read it off to you. There are only two tragedies in life. One is not getting what one wants. The other is getting it. Two tragedies of life. Now think to yourself, how long did you want that pair of trainers? How long did you want that new car? How long did you want that nice watch? How long? Now I have another question for you. When you bought those pair of Jordans, when you bought that new car, when you bought your new watch, was your desire the same level? Do you still desire that car, watch, house, whatever it may be, just as much as when you didn't have it? Think. Of course you didn't. Of course you don't. We desire what we don't have. And once we have it, we no longer desire it. So how do we apply this knowledge to our relationship? I will tell you how. Gentlemen, pay attention. You would have heard in previous lives of mine, if you've been following me for a while, where I tell you that you should not prioritize your woman. One more time. You should not prioritize your woman. Now, before the ladies get triggered, I'm coming. Let me explain. This is in your best interest. Firstly and foremostly, the most important person in your life, the person that you must spend the most amount of time with, is you. Yourself. So you are always number one priority. If you're not right up here, you're not good for anyone else. You can't help anyone. You can't benefit anyone. You can't be of service to anyone. So number one priority every single day is you. Number two priority is your children. I'll tell you why. You can't divorce children. You're stuck with them and they're stuck with you. It is what it is. Blood is thicker than water. You can't divorce your kids. So they're second on the priority list. And last but not least is your wife. She is third priority in that order. Yourself, your kids, and finally your wife. Now, generally speaking, I say to the brothers, to the men, you shouldn't prioritize your woman. You shouldn't. However, every now and again, in order to implement this law of finally releasing that tension and getting what you want, you do want to prioritize her. Like spice in a food. A little bit of spice makes the food beautiful. Too much spice and you've ruined the food. So every now and again, you want to take her out on a Friday night for dinner. You want to take her out on a weekend away. You want to do A, B, C, D, and E, however you define spending quality time. You want to do that in a committed long-term relationship. I'm not talking to you men who are not interested in relationships. You guys need to go and refer to AMS, Rich Cooper, so on and so forth. I'm not talking to you guys. I'm talking to the gentlemen who want to maintain strong desire from their women in a committed long-term relationship, i.e. marriage. Every now and again, you prioritize her a little bit. And I'll give you an example of tension and how it's released. I want you to think of a football match. Your team's in the final, Champions League final. Your team's in the final. It's 1-1, Man United, Bayern Munich, 1998 or 1999 Champions League final. 1-1. We get to the 89th minute. It's neck and neck. If you're a Man United fan, I want you to go back in time to that match, or to any match whereby your team was in the final of an important cup and it was 1-1 or 0-0 or whatever the case may be. How did you feel in that moment? How much tension was there pent up inside of you? How stressed out did you feel? Now, a few moments later, your team scores and you win the cup. What happens? All that pent up tension and energy is suddenly released in one dramatic movement, in one dramatic impulse. That pent up tension is finally released. Now, how do you feel? Euphoria. Absolute euphoria. Now that's that example, and I want you to compare that example with the following example I give you. Your football team is in the final of the Champions League, and by halftime they're winning 11-0. How do you feel? I'm sure you feel happy, but do you feel that tension? Is there any tension inside of you? Is there any pent up tension that needs to be released? None at all. You know your team is going to walk through this match. 11-0, there's absolutely no hope of a comeback. It's signed, sealed, and delivered. Which one felt more meaningful to you? The one where you won 11-0 with ease, or the match where it took you right to the wire and then that sudden burst of euphoria was released? It's that second one. Equally, I say to you this. You giving your wife too much attention, too much validation, too many compliments is like the football game where you are winning 11-0. Sure, she's going to be happy. Great, she's going to be very happy. But guess what? There's no tension. There's no pent-up tension. And as a result of that, desire comes down. Her desire diminishes. Just as in the 11-0 football game, it's like, well, that's great and everything, but this is kind of a bit of a walkover. The games we really appreciate are the games where our team went right to the wire and like soldiers, like warriors, they firmed it and then they scored the final goal, the killer goal. Those are the games we remember. That's the match I remember of 1999. When Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Ryan Giggs banged in those 2 goals. I remember that tension to this day. To this day, I remember it. Very few are the games that I remember, frankly speaking. And I certainly don't remember the games where we won 6, 7, 8, 9-0. They're meaningless. Now, you might come back and say to me, but Mahdi, isn't that like a toxic relationship? You're basically telling me that I should withhold all of this attention and validation from her right until the last bit and then give it to her? Isn't that like a toxic relationship? Isn't that like, imagine your team every single game took you right to the wire? You'd get diabetes and high blood pressure. I agree. Sometimes it's nice to see your team win 11-0. And sometimes it's nice to prioritize your wife. Now we go back round full circle to where I said to you, sometimes you should prioritize her. Sometimes you should take her out and treat her well and go to a lovely dinner somewhere. Just not too often. Not too often. Because then she will not appreciate it. Now we're going to go back to the love languages, because I missed an important point. Now Gary Chapman talks about the importance of making sure that your partner's love tank, as he calls it, is full, to ensure that they're constantly full of love. I disagree. I say this, that having a full love tank is just as harmful as having a full stomach. A full stomach leads to what? Bloating, indigestion, sickliness. If you fill your partner's love tank right to the brim, they're going to feel bloated, they're going to have indigestion, and they're going to feel sick of it. Sick of it. If someone tells you all the time, you're so amazing, you're so magnificent, you're so wonderful, or they lavish you with loads of gifts, or they take you to amazing places all the time, do you appreciate that? Do you value that? I want you to picture your favorite restaurant. The best restaurant you've ever been to in your life. Incredible cuisine, dining experience. Butlers, take your jacket at the door. £600 bill at the end, £600 bill at the end because it's so expensive. Plush, beautiful. Everything from A to Z is incredible. Amazing experience. How do you feel? Now I want you to ask yourself, that dining experience that you have just imagined in your mind, how do you now feel if I tell you that you must dine at this cuisine 3 times a day for the rest of your life? How do you feel? How would you feel? Do you still desire it as much? Do you still appreciate it as much? Well, I mean, your stomach's full. That's for sure. But now you feel bloated, indigestion, sick of it. So I say this, your partner's love tank, don't pander to the point where you're keeping it full to the brim all the time. This is just as harmful as having a full bloated stomach. For sure, you want to make her happy. You want to give her that love to keep her there, to keep that yin-yang tension. Too much, and she will take it for granted. Too little, and eventually she will leave. And this is the balance you need to figure out in a relationship. And it's hard. It's not easy. But this conversation is not black and white. Yes, we need desire from our women. That's important. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Your woman needs to be loved as well if you're in a committed, long-term relationship. And if she doesn't have love, it don't matter how good the sex is, believe me, she's leaving. She's leaving. Eventually she's leaving. So you need to keep on top of that as well. Not too full to the point where she becomes bloated, suffers from indigestion, becomes sick, but just enough to keep the stomach satisfied. The stomach needs to be satisfied, and remember, the stomach can operate on very little. It can operate healthily on very little. So fill up that tank, just not too much. All right, guys, I hope that was beneficial. I'm going to take a look at